I'm 22, in my final year of college, and just found out something that has completely blown my life apart. I feel like I'm trapped in someone else's dream, and the worst part is, I didn't even know it was happening until now. This all started 2 weeks ago, when I tried applying for a graduate program. I had been majoring in psychology, or so I thought, for the last 3.5 years. I'd worked hard, made the dean's list twice, and had my eyes set on a clinical psych master's. My advisor had always been a little weird about scheduling meetings, but I chalked it up to being overworked. We mostly emailed back and forth anyway. When it came time to submit my transcript to the graduate program, I couldn't find it online. That's when I contacted the registrar's office to get a physical copy, and that's when everything fell apart. According to my official records, I'm not a psychology major. I've never been one. I'm registered under the nursing program, have been since freshman year. At first, I thought it was a clerical error. I laughed, an anxious, confused kind of laugh, and told the registrar they must have made a mistake, but they double-checked, pulled up the documents I signed, and showed me the major declaration form. My signature was on it, except it wasn't. It was forged. I know my own handwriting. That wasn't it. But whoever did it knew enough to make it pass. Knew enough to change my declared courses behind the scenes, manipulate the electives, even swap professors when I wasn't paying attention. Looking back now, it makes a horrifying amount of sense. All the required classes I thought were gen eds, the weird labs I thought were psych-related were nursing track prerequisites had been set up, and there's only one person in my life controlling and persistent and connected to pull something like this off with noticing, my mom. The moment I got back to my apartment, I didn't even know what I was going to say. I just remember my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She picked up, all cheerful like nothing was wrong, and I didn't even bother easing into it. I asked her straight up if she had anything to do with my major being changed to nursing. She went quiet. Not shocked, not confused, just quiet. Then she sighed and said something I will never forget. I was wondering when you'd find out. That one sentence nearly made me drop the phone. I started shouting. I didn't care that I was pacing around my apartment, practically yelling into the void. She just sat there calmly and tried to justify, said psychology was a waste of time, that I'd never find a good job with that degree, that she had to protect my future. Apparently, she did it right after orientation, back when I gave her power of attorney temporarily for medical paperwork and financial aid stuff. I'd been 17 at the time, and my school required it for certain forms. I never imagined she'd use it for this. She said I was too idealistic, and that I needed structure. According to her, psychology was some fantasy I'd grow out of, but nursing would always be in demand, always stable, always respectable. The kicker? She said she thought I'd eventually thank her for it. I don't even remember the rest of the call. I think I hung up in the middle of her talking. I felt sick, betrayed, like the last 4 years of my life had been hijacked without my consent. I called my dad, hoping, praying, that he'd be on my side, but he already knew. Apparently, this was something they'd both agreed on when I first started college. He just didn't think I'd care that much, since the classes were similar anyway. I wanted to scream. I almost did. Because all this time I'd been going to classes I didn't choose, submitting assignments for a degree no one thought I'd care? They didn't even give me the chance to care. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the floor, staring at my printed transcript, wondering how the hell I was this deep into something I didn't even pick. And worse, part of me started questioning everything. Like, what if they're right? What if psych really was a pipe dream? What if I was too naive to know what was best for me? That was the scariest part. Not just that they lied, but that I'd believed in myself so little that they got away with it. And the clock was ticking. I had just 4 months until graduation, in a field I never agreed to study. The next morning I skipped all my classes. Every single one. I couldn't bring myself to sit through a single lecture, knowing it was all for a future someone else had built for me. I just kept thinking, how many times did I tell my mom I loved psychology? How many nights did I stay up researching grad programs, talking about becoming a therapist? And the whole time, she just smiled and nodded, like she was indulging a child's imagination. I spent the day emailing everyone I could, academic advisors, department heads, even the Office of Student Conduct. At first, most of them brushed me off, saying it was too late in the program to suddenly claim I was in the wrong major. But once I brought up forged documents and misuse of power of attorney, they took it more seriously. I got pulled into a meeting the next day with the registrar and the dean of student affairs. They were polite, but skeptical. I could feel it, like they thought I was either exaggerating or just trying to bail out of a hard final semester. I showed them the forged declaration form and told them, point blank, that it wasn't my hand. They said they'd investigate, but the process would take weeks. And even if I was right, the damage might already be irreversible. My GPA, my classes, my transcript, all of it was tied to the nursing department. And unless I could somehow prove academic fraud with enough time to switch tracks, I'd still be walking across that stage with a degree I never wanted. I left the office more drained than I've ever felt. When I got home, I tried to talk to my roommate about it. She listened, but even she said something that made my stomach turn. Well, at least you'll still graduate, right? And that's when it hit me. No one really gets it. They see a degree as a win. They think if you're not failing, you should be grateful. But what if you didn't want that win? What if the victory was never yours to begin with? I didn't care about the diploma anymore. I wanted my choice back. So I did something impulsive. I emailed the head of the psychology department directly, told him everything, the forged form, the major swap, the entire story, and then I added one last thing. I asked if there was any way I could still graduate with a psych degree, even if it meant staying an extra semester, even if I had to overload on credits. He responded 3 hours later. His reply was just one sentence long. "Can you come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m.? I barely slept the night before the meeting. I kept rehearsing what I was going to say, trying to sound calm and put together, but my stomach was in knots. I couldn't tell if I was more scared of being told it was too late, being told that I was right. My mom had actually derailed my entire... At 8:45 a.m., I stood outside Dr. Harmon's office door, hands sweating, heart racing like I was about to take an exam I hadn't studied. He opened the door before I could knock. He looked tired, like someone who'd already read too many messy emails that week. But he wasn't cold, just direct. He didn't waste time. No small talk. Just told me to sit and asked me to walk him through everything again. So I did. I laid it all out. How I'd believed I was in the psych program. How all my electives somehow lined up. How I'd only discovered the truth when I tried to submit my transcript for graduate school. When I told him about the forged signature and the power of attorney paperwork from freshman year, he finally leaned back in his chair. That's when I saw something shift in his face. Some mix of understanding and concern. He asked if I had any proof. I told him I'd already filed a complaint with the registrar's office and was waiting on their investigation. Then I showed him a few of my old emails to my advisor from earlier semesters, ones where I'd asked about psychology-specific courses and internships, and they somehow always got redirected or pushed aside. He skimmed through them and frowned. He didn't say much at first, just stared at the screen. Then he finally said something I wasn't expecting. "This might not be the first time I've heard something like..." "Wait, what do you mean?" He told me that he's seen cases before parents get too involved, especially with students who had medical proxy or guardianship. But what made my case unique was how far into the program it had gone without being... He said that from his end, my academic record didn't show up at all under the no in-progress psych to them. But then he asked, "Do you actually be a psychologist?" Mother's decision? It hit me like because I didn't know anymore. I'd spent so long fighting the lie that I hadn't stopped to ask if the original plan was even still mine. Did I want psychology because I loved it? Or because I was just desperate to claw back control? I told him the truth. Didn't know. Not anymore. But I did know I never wanted nursing. And I sure as hell didn't want a life built on someone else's expectations. He nodded slowly. Then he opened his drawer and handed me a form. It was a special enrollment request to add psychology as a second major retroactively. It wasn't a fix, but it was a start. He looked me in the eye and said, "If you're serious, this will give you a shot. But it's going to be hard. You'd need to stay another semester, maybe 2. You'll probably have to fight the administration tooth and nail. You'll piss off your parents. And you might not walk in May." Then he added, "But you'll be walking, not them." I took the form, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like something, anything, was finally in my hands. Filling out that form felt like lighting a match in a room soaked with gasoline. I submitted it the next morning and CC'd the registrar's office, my current advisor, and the psychology department. Within 24 hours, I got a reply. Not from the registrar, not from the department, from my mom. Not a text, not a call. A full-blown, furious email, sent from the account she used when pretending to help me with financial aid stuff in first year. It was long, rambling, emotional, and manipulative in the most surgically precise way. She said she was devastated that I'd go behind her back like this, that I was being reckless and ungrateful, that I was throwing away a golden opportunity. Then she hit me with the classic, "Everything I've done, I did for you." She told me that if I went through with switching my major, or worse, delaying graduation, she and my dad wouldn't be in a position to continue supporting me, that they'd already sacrificed so much, that my tuition, my housing, even my phone bill were all hanging by a thread. In one breath, she claimed to love me, life itself, and in the next, threatened to cut me off. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Dr. Harmon. He responded a few hours later. "I figured this was coming. Let's talk tomorrow, and bring everything." When I met him again, I had the email, my original transcripts, screenshots of advisor messages, and the student portal logs showing my course schedule history. He went through everything carefully. Then he did something unexpected. He called the dean of students, right there in front of me. Apparently, my situation had already been flagged because of the forged documents complaint I filed last week, and they were reviewing it behind closed doors. But this email? This changed things. It proved that not only had my mom interfered in my education, but she was actively trying to coerce me into staying on a path I never chose by threatening financial retaliation. That's when Dr. Harmon gave me the biggest news yet. If I wanted to, I could file for an academic integrity violation on behalf of myself. against my own parents. He explained that students are protected under certain autonomy clauses, especially when someone uses legal loopholes to manipulate their academic direction. It wouldn't be a quick process, and it wouldn't guarantee I'd get my psych degree in time for graduation, but it would give me full control of my file, remove any administrative blocks, and potentially wipe out the nursing major altogether if proven. It would also mean going completely independent. I'd lose financial aid linked to my parents' income. I'd have to reapply for need-based aid using my own financial status. I'd be legally declaring that I was no longer a dependent of my family. I asked him for a day to think, but deep down, I already knew what I had to do. I had spent the last 4 years living a life I didn't choose. If I didn't take back control now, I never would. That night, I stared at my ceiling in the dark for hours. I thought about everything: losing my parents' support, having to find a job mid-semester, the fact that I might not graduate with my friends. I thought about how my mom would react when the school formally notified her that she'd been reported. I imagined the silence from my dad, the kind that always hit harder than his words. But none of that scared me more than the idea of waking up 10 years from now in a hospital room, clipboard in hand, pretending I cared about a career I never wanted, a life I was pushed into. So the next morning, I marched straight into the student affairs office and signed the paperwork. I officially filed the... I also requested financial independence status. That meant a full audit, an affidavit, and submitting proof that I'd been living independently for at least part of the year. I didn't have all of it yet, but I had enough to get the ball rolling. What I wasn't ready for was how fast word spread. By the end of the week, my mom had emailed my roommate. She told her I was going through a mental health crisis and asked if I'd been acting erratic. My roommate, to her credit, told her to back off, but it didn't stop there. Next came the texts from extended family, cousins, aunts, even my grandmother, all suddenly reaching out with vague messages like, "We're here for you if you need anything," or "You don't have to do this alone." It was clear my mom had already spun a version of the story that made her look like the devastated parent whose child had fallen under bad influences. I felt like being discredited even speak, but then something I never expected. I got a call from my old psych professor, one I'd taken in freshman. He'd heard what was going on. Apparently, Dr. Harmon had looped him in for a character reference as part of the retroactive. He said he remembered, said I asked questions no one else did, that I was the only one in class who actually seemed to care about people acted the way they did, not just how to. He told me he'd back my request personally, and he'd already drafted a recommendation letter to help push it through. I don't think he knew it, but that phone call saved me, because just when I started doubting whether all of this was worth the chaos, someone who didn't owe me anything, reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that this was real, that I mattered. 1 week after filing the report, I got the email. The university had reviewed my case and was officially recognizing the forged major declaration as a violation of academic integrity. They couldn't outright accuse my mom, but the documentation I'd submitted, including the mismatched signature, power of attorney abuse, and especially that email, was enough to move forward. They gave me 2 options. Option 1, finish the semester in nursing, graduate on time, and have the degree officially marked as disputed major track. That would show on my transcript forever, and it'd be up to me to explain it to every job or grad school I applied to. Option 2, scrap the nursing credits, retroactively reinstate my psychology major, and stay for 1 additional year to complete the remaining psych core requirements. I didn't even hesitate. I chose option 2. I was already expecting a fight, but I didn't know the next blow would come from my own bank. 2 days later, I tried using my debit card to buy groceries. Declined. I checked my... Turns out, my mom had removed herself as a cosigner and pulled every cent out of the account I'd been using since I was 17. The same account my direct deposit job checks had been going into. She claimed it was her account all along, one she'd allowed me to use. I called her. She didn't answer, just sent a 1-line text. Actions have consequences. She really believed she was teaching me a lesson, that she was disciplined like I was still 13 and grounded for breaking curfew. She thought this would scare me into backing down. Instead, it lit a fire. I walked straight to the student legal office and explained everything. Within an hour, they connected me with a local lawyer who agreed to help pro bono after hearing my story. We were going to file a claim to recover the portion of that money that could be proven as mine. Paychecks, financial aid disbursements, personal scholarship, every single dollar I could track. I also called my job and switched direct deposit accounts. No more money disappearing into some fake joint checking account. My new one? Opened in my name, with my own paperwork, no cosigner, no shadows. That night, I slept on a half-inflated air mattress in my friend's living room, eating a gas station sandwich, and for some reason, I felt more free than I ever had in my life, because for the first time, I was broke, angry, and terrified, but I was finally myself. I was running on fumes, no savings, no backup. I had applied for emergency housing assistance through the university, and while they were reviewing my case, I was couch surfing between 2 friends who barely had room for themselves. I'd packed up my essentials in 2 backpacks and was living out of them, trying to stay afloat while juggling classes, work, and the fallout with my family. But then, something unexpected happened. Dr. Harmon called me into his office again. I thought it was about paperwork or another update on my case, but instead he sat me down and asked if I'd be interested in a paid research assistant position. Apparently, one of his grad students had dropped out of the psych program mid-semester, and they needed someone to help with transcription, interview coordination, and survey data. It wasn't glamorous, it paid, and more importantly, it came with a partial tuition waiver. I didn't even let him finish the sentence. I said yes. That same week, I moved into a shared apartment and researcher. It wasn't much. Twin bed, flickering bathroom, paper thin, but it was mine. No one could take it from me. I started feeling stable again. I threw myself into the research work, started rebuilding my schedule around psych classes, and for the first time since the beginning of college, I actually wanted to open my laptop in the morning. And then, right as things were starting to settle, another blow. I found out who told my mom about the major change in the first place. It wasn't the registrar. It wasn't a school official. It was my best friend from high school, the same girl who helped me move into my dorm freshman year, the same one who stayed over at my house dozens of times. She had been casually texting with my mom the entire time, and when I told her about my major switch, back before the fallout had even started, she'd passed it along to my mom, thinking she was helping us reconnect. I only found out because she texted me this. I didn't mean to cause all this. I thought she deserved to know. She's your mom. I couldn't even respond. My hands were shaking too hard. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about how easily people justify crossing boundaries when it's wrapped in the excuse of family, how quickly people forget that abuse doesn't always look like bruises and screaming matches. Sometimes it looks like someone smiling, while they reroute your entire life without telling. I blocked her number, deleted every photo, every DM. She was part of a version of me that no longer existed, because that old me, the one who kept quiet, who second-guessed herself, who let other people decide what made sense, she was gone, and good riddance. I hadn't spoken to my mom in nearly a month. After everything, the forged major, the emptied bank account, the guilt trip emails, I'd shut the door, hard, but apparently she wasn't done. She called me from a different number. I didn't answer. Then she left a voicemail. Her voice was calm, almost eerie. She said she wanted to meet, face to face, like adults. She made it sound like I was being childish by avoiding her, like I'd just run off on some wild rebellion instead of reclaiming a life she'd hijacked. I debated ignoring it, but part of me needed to hear what else she thought she had to say. Maybe it was for closure. Maybe I wanted to see if there was any part of her that still saw me in all this, not just the product she'd tried to shape. We met in a neutral place, a coffee shop near campus. I brought Dr. Harmon's assistant with me, just to feel grounded. My mom showed up exactly on time, dressed in her usual respectable mom outfit, pearls, blazer, polished smile. She didn't even say hello before launching in. She said she was willing to forgive me, that I'd clearly been manipulated by professors who didn't understand how the real world worked. She still believed nursing was my best path, and she said she'd even consider reinstating financial support if I agreed to finish the program as originally planned. Then she laid it out, flat. If you go through with this psychology nonsense, you're on your own. For good. No tuition, no housing, no wedding fund, nothing. You'll be dead to me until you come to your senses. Didn't flinch. I told her I already was on my own, that I'd figured it out without her, that I was already rebuilding, and I wasn't interested in trading my freedom for her money. She blinked like I'd slapped her. Then the mask slipped. She leaned in and said something I wasn't expecting, something that made every hair on my arm stand up. You think this is the first time I've done this? I stared at her, not sure what she meant, and then she laughed, quiet and bitter, and said, Your brother never wanted to go into finance. He wanted to be a music teacher. Guess who changed his major too? My stomach dropped. I knew my brother hated his job, but I always thought it was just burnout. I never knew he'd been forced into it the same way I had. And now? I couldn't unhear it. My mom didn't just manipulate me. She'd made a career out of controlling her children. I stood up, didn't say a word, just left. She didn't follow. I walked back to campus in silence, heart pounding with a new kind of rage, not just for myself, but for my brother too. I didn't know if he'd ever admit it, but I knew now. We were both victims of the same story, different scripts, same author, and I was done reading her version. Graduation day came and went without a cap and gown, while the rest of my class posed for photos in their nursing stoles, smiling for family, hugging professors. I was holed up in the psych department lounge, helping set up chairs for a guest lecture on trauma psychology. My graduation wouldn't be for another year, maybe less if I overloaded summer classes, but I didn't feel left behind. For the first time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The week before, I'd won a small university research grant. It wasn't much, but enough to buy groceries, keep the lights on, and start building the kind of resume that actually reflected who I was. Dr. Harmon had already offered to sponsor me for grad school once I finished the psych program. There was a future again, and just as I was settling into the quiet rhythm of rebuilding, something strange happened. I got a letter, a real one, in the mail. No return address, just a plain envelope with my name written in small, slanted handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Inside, it was from my brother. One paragraph. No greetings, no closings. Just, I saw what you did. Mom's furious. But thank you. I'm not ready to walk away from everything yet. But you made me think about the life I might have had. Maybe I'll find it again. Proud of you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it back up and tucked it into my psychology textbook. Because maybe that's what this whole thing had been about from the start. Not just saving myself, but breaking a pattern that ran deeper than I realized. My mom hasn't reached out since that last coffee shop meeting. Not for my birthday. Not for holidays. Not even to lash out. Maybe she's waiting for me to come crawling back. Or maybe she's just rewritten the story in her mind so thoroughly that I no longer exist. Either way, I'm okay with it. Because what I have now, it's mine. My friends helped me move into a better apartment. My grant work got published in a small psych journal. And next fall, I'll walk across that stage with a psychology degree. One I fought for, I chose, and I do. There won't be a single person in the audience who doesn't know the truth about how hard I had to fight to get there. I didn't just switch majors. I escaped a life that wasn't mine, and I'll never hand pen again.